Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. New week, new headlines. Biden landed in Ukraine and hogged all of them. But why did he go? And what did he do there? We'll tell you all about it. Also, all the court drama in Pakistan involving Imran Khan. Meanwhile, the Taliban want to convert military bases into special economic zones. America is dealing with a multi-trillion-dollar debt problem. Credit card bills are at a record high. Social media giants want you to cough up money. And why do people touch and sometimes break artworks? A $42,000 balloon dog was shattered and it has triggered a very interesting discussion. All of this and more is coming up. The headlines first. Is Iran close to making an atom bomb? Tehran denies reports that it has enriched uranium to 84%. You need 90% to make a bomb. The International Atomic Energy Agency has sought an explanation from Iran. Tensions spiral between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Gunfight erupts between their border forces after the Taliban shut the busiest Pak-Afghan border crossing at Torkham. The only newspaper of Bangladesh's main opposition party halts printing. The government suspended it, the court upheld the order. The Dainik Dinkal has been the voice of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party for over 3 decades. In Brazil, tragedy hits the carnival weekend. More than 35 people dead as torrential rains trigger floods and landslides in the southeastern state of Sao Paulo. And France says India, the US and Saudi Arabia blocked the move to tax tech giant. Global talks focused on whether multinationals should declare their profits in every country where they operate and avoid paying taxes. Joe Biden went to Kiev. A daring move, we have to say. Kiev has been under attack. Just last week, Russia targeted the city with missiles. But US President Joe Biden, who has one of the world's most elaborate security arrangements, decided to go anyway. His team kept the visit a secret till the very last minute. No Air Force One. The US President took a train from Poland. What was the purpose of this visit? Was it just about the pictures to show an American president in the middle of a war zone? They like doing that. Or was there any substance to the trip? Well, a bit of both, to be fair. Biden took a walk through downtown Kiev. He was accompanied by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. The US President paid a visit to St. Michael's Monastery and the Wall of Remembrance, where portraits of more than 4,500 soldiers are displayed. These are those who died when Russia annexed Crimea. Biden paid a tribute to these soldiers. Air sirens were sounded at that moment. So those were the optics. Now let's talk about the substance. Biden did not go to Kiev empty-handed. He announced a fresh round of military assistance to Ukraine, a package of $500 million. What does it entail? What will Ukraine get? More ammunition, javelins and howitzers, but no fighter jets. And that is the headline. No fighter jets for Ukraine. A fresh round of sanctions was also part of today's announcement.
Democracy stands. The Americans stand with you, and the world stands with you. Kyiv has captured a part of my heart, I must say. Together, we've committed nearly 700 tanks and thousands of armored vehicles, 1,000 artillery systems, more than 2 million rounds of artillery ammunition, more than 50 advanced launch rocket systems, anti-ship and air defense systems, all defend Ukraine, and that doesn't count the other $500 million we're announcing with you today and tomorrow. That's going to be coming your way.
Kiev would paint this visit as a victory, but they clearly want more. They won the jets. What about Joe Biden? Well, he got the timing right at least. His visit comes just before a major speech. Russian President Vladimir Putin will deliver an address tomorrow. Putin is expected to talk about the war, among other things. So Biden timed his visit to a day before that. And yet the moves of an adversary could upend Biden's plans. I'm talking about China. Is China entering the war in Ukraine? The US says it is. It says that China is all set to arm Russia. The statement comes from US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He met with his Chinese counterpart in Munich, and this is what he said.
We also had an opportunity to talk about the Russian aggression against Ukraine. We're here in Munich, and many of the countries here are focused, as we are, on that aggression. And one of the things that I shared with him was a growing concern on our part that China is considering providing lethal support to Russia in its aggression against Ukraine.
The US is warning China. It says any escalation will have serious consequences. What is China's response? It's being cagey. It says it won't accept quote-unquote finger-pointing and coercion from the United States. It called the American claims lies. But will it send weapons to Russia? No word on that. If China does, it would change everything. If China arms Russia, the implications will be wide-ranging. The Russian offensive will get a new lease of life. China's support might encourage Putin to make bold moves. The conflict itself could transform. The war in Ukraine is already being seen as a bit of a proxy battle. The West is arming Kiev. If China enters the fray, we'll have two superpowers on both sides. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea will be one bloc. The US and allies will be the other. And they'll have no option but to pump more weapons into Ukraine. And if that happens, a protracted war is all but certain. Let's break down these developments for you from every angle. We'll start with America. Over the weekend, Blinken was a man on a mission. He said China is ready to arm Russia, and he used every possible forum to broadcast this message. What is the basis of this claim? Apparently, some credible intelligence inputs. And if it happens, it won't be a surprise. You see, China is already helping Russia. It is supplying important technology to Moscow. It is giving equipment with distinct military applications. Do you know who is exporting these goods? China's state-owned defense companies. And who are they selling to? Russian manufacturers, Russian state-owned manufacturers. Let me tell you more about the kind of equipment that China has sent to Russia so far. And I have a list. Navigation equipment for shipping, jamming technology, parts for fighter jets, and semiconductors or chips. Russia is also buying Chinese drones. The ones that are commercially available, the Russians are buying them. The Russian forces use them with explosives. So that's how Beijing has helped Moscow so far. They haven't sent any arms directly, but they've fulfilled important needs of the Russian military. All this equipment is technically meant for civilian use, but it serves more purposes. It can be reprocessed for the military. So you can say that so far the support was covert, but now China could expand the support. The US says China is planning to send lethal weapons to Russia.
Lethal support. What would that entail? What do you think?
Weapons.
That's ammunition. That's
Primarily weapons.
primarily.
There's a whole gamut of things that fit in that category, for everything from ammunition to the weapons themselves.
So far, Beijing has called for a peaceful resolution. It has supported Russia quietly, but it did not share lethal weapons. Is China now prepared to cross that line? It's hard to say. In Munich, Chinese officials stuck to their old talking points.
The crisis in Ukraine is not what we want to see. We are deeply worried about the expansion and long-term effects of this war. Like all parties, we are deeply worried. China is not a party to the crisis in Ukraine, but we have not stood by and we have not done anything to add fuel to the fire.
But Beijing could always deviate from that position. So here's a question. What's in it for China? Why would China arm Russia and further alienate the West? What are the immediate benefits for Beijing? Well, more influence over Russia for one. And that's a story in itself. How the Russia-China equation has changed. The Soviet Union, remember, was once China's big brother. Stalin famously made Mao wait for weeks for a meeting. But today, China holds the advantage. It's a bigger economy with more international clout. It is in a position to arm the Russians, and it can reinforce this advantage. But the bigger gain is long-term. Arm the Russians, prolong the conflict, and bog America down with an endless war. The US and its allies will be tied up as Ukraine keeps increasing its demands, and this suits China. So it may work. But here's the flip side. Entering this war may also invite more Western sanctions. Can China afford that? They've just come out of a devastating third wave of the pandemic. Their economy depends on exports. They cannot afford to take a hit there. In 2021, exports made up about 20% of China's GDP. That should tell you something. Economic sanctions will deal a big blow to it. So the risk is high for Beijing. Dumping the zero-COVID playbook came with huge costs. Can Xi Jinping afford another gamble? Again, it's hard to say, given how unpredictable he is. But if the past is any proof, we say expect the unexpected. Meanwhile, in the east, another conflict is intensifying. The Korean peninsula is tense. North Korea is firing one missile after another. Today, it launched 2 ballistic missiles. And this was Pyongyang's second test in 3 days. These tests came with an ominous threat. Kim Jong-un's sister has spoken out. Her name is Kim Yo-jong. Listen to what she said. The frequency of using the Pacific Ocean as our shooting range depends on the nature of the U.S. military's actions. Let me repeat that. She says Pyongyang is using the Pacific as its shooting range. What is the U.S. military doing? More shooting. The U.S. is conducting military drills in the region, 2 separate drills with 2 regional powers, Japan and South Korea. Looks like a chicken and egg situation. Who instigated whom here? And why is this escalation happening now? Let's start with North Korea. Their missile tests are a frequent affair. Provocation or no provocation, North Korea tests missiles. It conducts these tests for 3 reasons. Number 1, to improve its technology. Number 2, to send a message to rivals like the US. And number 3, to shore up loyalty at home, to make the Kims look tough. You may remember how the year began for them. Kim Jong-un started 2023 with a pledge. He wants to, quote-unquote, exponentially increase North Korea's arsenal. And he's been chasing these goals for the past few years. He wants 2 things, basically, more tactical nuclear weapons and higher yield of nuclear bombs. What does that mean? What is higher yield? Yield is the amount of energy a bomb can release. So the higher the energy, the more lethal the bomb. Essentially, Kim wants a more powerful bomb for North Korea, and he may be on course to achieving this goal. This month, Pyongyang hosted a massive parade. We told you about it. The event was in news because of Kim's daughter, Kim Joo-ae. Her appearance fueled speculation. She is now being seen as a potential successor to her father. But that wasn't the only highlight of the parade. The second headline was this missile, the Hwasong-17. The Hwasong-17 is North Korea's biggest missile yet. Reports say it can travel as far as 15,000 kilometers. And that is enough to reach the United States, 15,000 kilometers. And the other worry is this. The missile is an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM. ICBMs are mainly designed for nuclear bombs. Some carry just 1 warhead. The newer versions are more advanced. A modern-day ICBM can carry multiple warheads. What about the North Korean ICBMs? How much can they pack? There is no independent assessment yet, but the US and its allies are not underestimating Pyongyang. Japan, meanwhile, wants the United Nations to intervene.
From the launch on the 18th, it is clear that North Korea is pursuing the practical application of ICBM-class ballistic missiles. The series of actions taken by North Korea is absolutely unacceptable as it threatens the peace and security of our region and the international community.
Tokyo says North Korea will conduct more tests in the future. In Seoul, politicians are calling for nukes. There is a strong support for the idea now in South Korea. Consider what the head of the ruling party said. His name is Chung Jin-suk, and I'm quoting, "We must first secure concrete nuclear deterrence. We need to strengthen our kill chain so North Korea can never rise to its feet again if it uses nukes on the Korean peninsula." Now, what is a kill chain? It is a reference to a preemptive strike capability. That's a kill chain. If the South feels that a nuclear attack from the North is imminent, it will try to, quote-unquote, decapitate the Kims. It will strike at the leadership of North Korea, kill the Kims. What about the United States? What will the US do in the event of a North Korean attack? The US promises ironclad support to South Korea and Japan. But then again, these are all just promises and scenarios. The fact of the matter is, Kim Jong-un is ramping up his arsenal. Every missile test shrinks the scope of a diplomatic solution. It was a day of high drama in Pakistan. At the center of it was former Prime Minister Imran Khan. He has made some very powerful enemies lately, including the all-powerful Pakistani military. Now, Imran Khan has many cases against him. He's out on bail. Last year, he was disqualified from contesting elections. His supporters were behind violent protests outside the Election Commission's office, and he's out on bail in that case. Today was the bail hearing. He reached the Lahore High Court with his supporters and party men, and this is what followed. And there's more news from Pakistan, in fact. The economic crisis is worsening by the day. Manufacturers are shutting shop, factories are winding up operations, imports are stranded at sea, and Pakistan has gone bankrupt. Not my words. This is what their defense minister said.
आपने सुना होगा डिफॉल्ट हो रहा है या दिवालिया हो रहा है या मेल्टडाउन हो रहा है वो हो चुका हुआ है कि जो हमारे मुल्क के इस वक्त हालात है हम दिवालिया मुल्क के रहने वाले हैं.
Quite a candid admission by Khwaja Asif there. He called Pakistan a bankrupt country. There are many telltale signs of this meltdown. Look at the auto sector. Car sales have crashed, down by 65% in January compared to the same period last year. This is the lowest in almost 3 years. Car maker Suzuki has been on a rough ride in Pakistan. In the past 2 months, Suzuki has had to shut its plant 5 times. In the past 6 months, the plant has remained shut for about 40 days. The latest shutdown could last beyond tomorrow. What's the reason behind the shutdowns? The company says a constant shortage of parts and components is to blame for this. Then we have the Indus Motor Company. It manufactures Toyota vehicles in Pakistan. Just this month, it had to shut down its plant for 2 weeks. The reason? The company faces major hurdles in importing raw materials. It says banks are not helping. They're not giving clearances for its consignments to be imported. And why are Pakistan's banks making life so difficult for manufacturers? You see, the Pakistani rupee is depreciating in value against the US dollar. $1 roughly equals 261 Pakistani rupees now. The depreciating value of Pakistani currency has made imports very expensive because global trade takes place largely in American dollars. Pakistan's automobile sector is in peril, and the people are the ones bearing the cost. Do you know how many people have lost their jobs because of these shutdowns? Around 300,000 Pakistanis who were directly or indirectly involved with the automobile sector now have no jobs. Next, we come to the mobile phone makers. Reports say major multinational players have halted their operations. Why? Because these companies do not own enough dollars to send to their head offices. Again, Pakistan's negligible forex reserves are to blame for this. Dollars are the new gold in Pakistan, and they're facing a real shortage of it. The impact has been wide-ranging. I'll give you an example. Pakistan's Drug Regulatory Authority is getting a lot of letters these days. Pharma companies say they cannot continue production. Not 1 or 2. Over 3 dozen pharma companies say they don't have raw materials to make medicines. In fact, there's a whole list of companies that have either shut down or slowed down their operations in Pakistan. And these companies belong to a variety of sectors, from agriculture to pharma to even furniture. So Pakistan's manufacturing sector is taking a big hit, and 2 main reasons for that: no raw materials and low demand. Let me explain how this works. Pakistan is running critically low on forex reserves. That's foreign exchange. You need this money to import goods and services. In Pakistan, forex reserves have shrunk to just about $3 billion. That won't even cover imports for 3 weeks. So they don't have money. What do? They curb imports, and the result is this. Containers are stranded at sea and at ports. These containers carry raw materials. The raw materials that manufacturers need, the raw materials that factories need. They're stuck. and the factories are not getting them, so they can't produce their goods. Then we have the low demand. Inflation is sky high in Pakistan. Everything is very expensive. So even if manufacturers make the goods, who is going to buy them? Citizens are struggling to get essentials. Milk costs more than 250 rupees a litre. Chicken costs almost 800 rupees. These are basic necessities. They now become luxuries in Pakistan, a luxury which many people can't seem to afford.
We have to skip meals now. Sometimes we don't have lunch. Other times we don't have breakfast. We used to feed our children a proper diet, but not now. I now cook chicken only once a month. My children want to eat biryani, but we can't afford it.
Amid all of this, Pakistan decided to send aid to Turkey. The world should be praising this noble gesture, but it isn't. Do you know why? Because Pakistan again tried to pull a fast one. Last year, it suffered severe floods. The world sent aid. Turkey also sent aid to Pakistan. And here is what they've done. Pakistan has repackaged Turkish humanitarian aid and sent it back to Ankara. Pakistan's own consignments have exposed it. The outer packaging says this is Pakistani aid, but the boxes inside say that the material has been sent by Turkey. And this comes just days after the Pakistani Prime Minister was told not to visit the quake-hit country. It's one embarrassment after another for Pakistan. The cost of living crisis is taking its toll on the world. In Moldova, thousands protested against their government. They said the bills were so high they'd much rather have Russia take over their country. In Singapore, people are abandoning their pets. But the worst hit seems to be the United Kingdom, the only major economy expected to shrink in 2023. The IMF says Britain will do worse than Russia, and that's saying a lot. So what is the government doing to ease the pressure? Taking inspiration from India, it seems. From the midday meal scheme for school children, London's Mayor Sadiq Khan plans to offer free meals to every primary school student, irrespective of household income. India has had such a scheme for years, the largest of its kind in the world. Here's a report.
The cost of living crisis in the UK has pushed families to the brink. While inflation eased in January, it was still 10.1%. That's overall inflation. Food inflation levels were at 16.7%. Inflation for housing and bills was at a whopping 26.7%. These are costs everyone has to bear. Thousands of households are surviving on government benefits, and they're becoming increasingly dependent on food banks. These are run by charitable organizations and provide free food. They've seen a 90% increase in demand compared to a year ago.
I know that teachers are using food banks. That's not right. Just like the nurses, completely the same. It's not right for anybody to not be getting a proper living wage that isn't matching how everything's gone up.
To combat this dire situation, London's mayor has come up with a plan. Sadiq Khan has proposed free meals to all primary schools children in London. This would mean free meals to about 270,000 children. It would cost over $150 million. Is this the first step of its kind in the UK? No. Children from poorer households are already entitled to free meals at school. The new plan makes it universal. It's expected to benefit over 100,000 children in London. It's similar to India's midday meal scheme. Some quick facts. India's midday meal scheme is the largest nutritional program for school children in the world. About 120 million primary school children benefit from the scheme, and it's been around for decades. The scheme was first conceived in pre-independent India in 1925. It was implemented statewide in Tamil Nadu as early as 1962. It was launched at the national level in 1995. The scheme has helped provide relief to millions of families in India. London may now reap similar benefits. Of course, the UK isn't the only country struggling with the cost of living crisis. It's manifesting in different ways across the world. We'll take two more cases, Moldova and Singapore. Moldova is Ukraine's neighbor. Its president recently accused Russia of instigating protests to topple the government. On Sunday, thousands of demonstrators turned up at the capital. They said the cost of living is so high, they'd much rather have Russia take over.
We are here because of the pensions. They said they will increase the pensions.
Did the Shore party call you to come? Elon Shore?
We can't live like this anymore.
In Singapore, the cost of living crisis is affecting more than just humans. Rising costs have made it difficult for people to take care of their pets. Some pets are being donated to shelters or pet adoption services. Many are being abandoned. This is illegal in Singapore. People can be jailed for up to a year and fined about $7,500. Yet authorities say they're investigating about 38% more abandonment cases than a year ago. Whether through legal means or abandonment, Singaporeans are giving up on their furry friends. Inflation isn't sparing anyone, human or otherwise.
A new cancer is spreading through America. It doesn't harm the body, but it cripples lives and livelihoods. I'm talking about the cancer of debt. Look at this headline. US credit card debt now totals nearly $1 trillion. American households are in distress. They have put almost $1 trillion on credit cards, which is a record, an all-time high. How much credit card debt do Americans owe? A whopping $986 billion. That's an increase of $130 billion from last year. What's the average debt of a household? Around $6,500. This is what Americans owe to credit companies. How many are affected? At the end of 2022, more than 18 million borrowers were behind on their credit card bills, which is an alarming number. Credit card debt is the worst form of borrowing. It attracts a high interest rate. In the case of the US, around 20% on average, which is a very high number. And the latest figures show that Americans are caught in a debt trap. The question is why? Why are Americans putting so much money on credit cards? Because they're struggling to make ends meet. High inflation is hurting monthly budgets. Inflation in the US is around 8%. The target for the US Federal Reserve, their central bank, the American central bank, the US Federal Reserve Bank, their target is 2%. So inflation is 3 times higher than the target. Plus the Fed has increased interest rates. So rates for borrowing have gone up, and that is making things worse because anyone with a loan will end up paying more. The credit card situation is just a symptom. The real problem is much bigger. America's total household debt is also at a record high. They owe $16.9 trillion. This includes all kinds of loans, credit card debt, home loans, car loans, you name it. $16.9 trillion in debt. Americans are struggling to make ends meet. I'll show you more numbers. These are from last year. Nearly 65% Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. The middle class is hurting the most. More than 80% of them cut down on their savings. Either they saved less every month or they dipped into their savings to survive. This could have a big impact on America's economy. Consumer spending is 70% of the US GDP. So if households spend less, the US economy will decline. And this is an indictment of the US president. He's failing to address one of the biggest problems that Americans face today. That is debt. And this is not just about personal finance. In America, debt is part of the popular culture. Most students graduate with a student loan. Going by one claim, 45 million Americans have student loan debt. That's about 1 in 5 US adults. In 2015, more than 100 million Americans had an auto loan. 114 million Americans have borrowed to buy a home. Long story short, America has a debt problem, one that it is yet to recognize and address. Biden's visit to Kiev has created waves. But will Americans support this war if they cannot pay their own bills? Expect the president to face tough scrutiny at home. Do you remember quiet quitting? It means doing the bare minimum at your job. It dominated the mood of the post-pandemic workforce. But it's so last year. Our next story is about another quiet hiring. After all, it is screaming the loudest this year. But what does it mean? If you're a manager, it means you're acquiring more talent without hiring more people. You move your current team to newer roles, you give them different positions, you assign them more projects internally, expand their KRA, as it were, key responsibility area. If you're a worker, it means more work. It's the opposite of quiet quitting. There, you had to do the bare minimum to keep your job. Here, you go above and beyond your job description. Like it or not, this is the new workplace trend. And while most people are already complaining, quiet hiring has some benefits too. Employers definitely love the idea. It saves the company time, money, and resources. It also increases flexibility because resources are deployed quickly. But what's in it for employees? Well, you can learn new skills, you can become more engaged and productive. Also, this method may sound backward, but it's brilliant in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. And this is not even an industry secret. It's a tried and tested method. I can tell you that in the news business, it's been around forever. When you walk into the office, you have no idea what's coming your way. It's challenging, but it's fun. Now it seems to be spreading across the board. The question is, why now? And the answer is this: the world faces an economic slowdown. There is pressure on companies. They must keep their costs down. And one of the big costs is the talent bill. Companies are cutting it. Just look at the mass layoffs. The year has just begun and 297 tech companies have laid off nearly 95,000 workers. At this rate, there could be more than 900,000 job cuts this year. That's nearly 6 times the total for the industry in 2022. And the hiring landscape is even more competitive, especially after the great resignation of the pandemic. That's when about 48 million people quit. They quit their jobs in 2021. So organizations had to become more creative. They had to use the remaining staff to do all the work. Well, that's quiet hiring for you. It may be working for the bosses, but it's frustrating a lot of workers. Many don't want to transition into roles they aren't interested in. Others say it reduces their agency. After all, added work is not something they signed up for. Many end up getting burnt out. Workers are often expected to go beyond their job without the perks. No increased pay, no bonus. And where does this leave the quiet quitters? Well, in a spot, because now you're expected to work in overdrive, not in cruise control. Now to the obvious question: will doing your own work well invite more work? Is this the punishment for being a talented hard worker? Well, experts say not necessarily. It can be a win-win situation, depends how you look at it. Tackling new assignments can expand your skill set. It can make you a more well-rounded employee. And since the brightest minds are chosen to do more, it can also boost your morale. It can help workers network with colleagues from other business areas, and who knows, maybe you'll find new areas of interest. Maybe you'll discover potential you did not know that you had. But what about the money? It's only fair to expect a pay raise. But given the environment, it may not always happen. So ask for other benefits like a bonus or flexible hours or additional time off. You see, the workplace is changing. The way we work is changing. Mass layoffs are a daily story. The economy is under pressure. Work from home is ending. It's all a glorious flux. So prepare yourself for change. Arm yourself with the right tools and be tough mentally. Staying the course may be the key to success this year. The Taliban have made an announcement. They have plans to redo their foreign military bases. Once occupied by the US to house soldiers and ammunition, Kabul now wants to make it into an attractive destination for investors. In short, they want to create special economic zones. What are special economic zones? These are designated regions or zones that have a set of different economic laws, more liberal than the rest of the country. The aim is to promote investments, create jobs, and boost the economy. Afghanistan's Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs, Mullah Baradar, has given the go-ahead. The details of the plan are not public yet. Taliban officials say the pilot plan will begin in Kabul and in the northern Balkh province. This includes the famous Bagram Air Base. It's a former Soviet facility. It was the largest US military base during Washington's 2-decade stay. Located around 70 kilometers north of Kabul, it reportedly housed close to 20,000 American troops at one point. So how many bases are we talking about? On last count, Afghanistan had a total of 700 military bases. 400 of them reportedly belonged to the US and its allies. Then the US withdrew from Afghanistan in 2021. It shut these bases, left aircraft, vehicles, and weapons worth $7 billion. President Biden had some tough questions to answer at home.
I do not believe whatsoever what you're saying about the administration not working to manipulate that intelligence. To me, that is the most logical explanation of how so many in the intelligence community got this so wrong about what was going to happen in Afghanistan, why it would seem somehow logical for President Biden to leave the, quote, most advanced military weaponry, why some would not speak out against that if they were getting the false intelligence because it was coming from the top down to manipulate it. In my opinion, that's absolutely aid and comfort to the enemy.
Needless to say, US weapons then fell into the hands of the Taliban, who did not need a second invitation. As for the bases, many became parking spots. Now Kabul wants to change that. It wants businesses and trade centers to function in the military bases. It says that is to promote economic growth and development. But why now? It's because of the mess that Afghanistan is in. The Taliban's return in 2021 marked the beginning of a humanitarian and financial crisis. The United Nations estimates that more than 70% of the population needs humanitarian assistance. That's around 28 million Afghans. More than 6 million are a step away from famine. Citizens are struggling to survive. Afghanistan's economy is much worse. It is one of the world's most aid-dependent countries. Aid makes up about 40% of Afghanistan's GDP and 75% of the government spending. Donors invested as much as $65 billion in grants since 2002, but the Taliban's return changed everything. The new government in Kabul faced a slew of sanctions. The US froze the Afghan central bank's assets worth $7 billion. The pandemic and the war in Ukraine just added to the troubles. As a result, the economy shrunk. The World Bank says it contracted by close to 30 to 35% between 2021 and 2022. But Kabul wants to keep the cash flow going, and the creation of special economic zones is just one step in that direction. The Taliban also wants to use natural resources to its advantage. Reports peg the value of Afghanistan's natural resources at more than $1 trillion. In fact, last month, the Taliban said it planned to sign a contract with Chinese firms. The aim is to drill for oil in parts of northern Afghanistan. This is said to be the first major energy extraction agreement since 2021, one that will help get in revenue. But here's the catch. Taliban is no elected government, and Afghanistan is no democracy. Welfare for the people is perhaps the last on their priority, if at all. As for the dreams of foreign investments, those may remain pipe dreams. Reports say even the Chinese are now weighing their options carefully. This was after a series of attacks on hotels popular among Chinese businessmen. The attacks happened last year. The Islamic State took responsibility. Afghanistan still remains a dangerous country. For starters, it is run by a bunch of terrorists. Convincing businesses amidst this will be a Herculean task. And paying the bill may be the key to accessing social media this year. First Twitter, now Facebook and Instagram. They want you to pay. What for? For blue check marks and the verified title. Does this mean you lose your account if you don't pay? How much money are they asking for? And why are they asking for money after promising to keep the platform free? Our next report answers all these questions and more. Social media was once called the great enabler, a free space that enables all. It wasn't ever free though. It cost you time, your data, and your peace of mind, among other things. Well, now it will also cost you money. Meta wants you to pay. Meta is the company that controls Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. It wants money from users. And what is it offering in return? A blue check mark, the one that tells the world you've got a verified account. There's also a promise of higher reach. Your posts will be seen by more people. What will this cost you? $12 to $15 a month. The announcement came on Sunday. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, said, and I quote, "This new feature is about increasing authenticity and security across our services." Not sure about that, but Zuckerberg has definitely increased the burden on users. Meta Verified will be rolled out in Australia and New Zealand this week. Then it will gradually be launched around the world. Anybody can now get verified. All they need to do is provide a government ID. Meta has promised verified users some perks. They'll get protection against impersonation, they'll get direct access to customer care, and most importantly, their reach and engagement will increase. But talking about promises, if you happen to have a look at the Facebook homepage before 2019, you would have come across a promise. One where Facebook declared that the site was free and always will be. Well, the always ends now. You must pay for a verified account and a blue check mark. But what if you don't pay? Will you then lose your account? You can still use the platform, but you won't be playing in the big league. Where does that leave you? Behind the crowd. The level playing field, if there ever was one, is now being demolished. On a platform like Instagram, where individual content creation has taken off in a big way, this could impact the reach of many influencers, especially those influencers who don't have the capacity to give $15 every month. It's pretty simple now. If you want better reach, if you want more people to view your content, and if you want higher engagement, you have to pay. If you don't, you'll be at a natural disadvantage. But why has Meta walked back on its promise to always stay free? The answer is a year, 2022. It was a particularly harsh year for the tech industry. Big tech was no exception. Late last year, Meta let go of 13% of its workforce. 11,000 employees were laid off, and it plans to lay off more. Meta has reportedly ranked 7,000 existing employees as subpar. They could end up losing their jobs. 2022 was also a year of realization for social media companies. They realized that they could not depend entirely on ad revenues to keep their ship afloat. Meta's ad revenues declined for the first time last year. Advertising revenue made up 98% of their total earnings last year. So its scheme of charging users for verification is in fact aimed at shoring up non-ad revenues. The same story at Twitter. The company's ad revenues fell by 71% in December last year. Right after Elon Musk's takeover, Twitter's ad revenues fell by 55%. And this is a company that depends on ad sales for 90% of its revenue. Elon Musk was quick to respond. He repackaged Twitter Blue and made it available to anyone who was willing to pay $8 every month. The idea is to cut dependence on advertisers. Now, there might be another reason why Meta wants to diversify its revenue portfolio. After all, advertisers will not like a large chunk of their money to be spent on one man alone. Here's what happened. Meta has said it is increasing its spending on Mark Zuckerberg. Why? To make sure he's safe. So far, Meta was spending $10 million on Zuckerberg's personal safety. Now that amount has been increased to $14 million. It's a hike of 40%. Zuckerberg can use the money for additional personnel, equipment, services, and residential improvement. The blue check mark is not what it used to be. It was once a status symbol. Back in the day, you earned it. Now, all you have to do is pay for it. Imagine being alone in an art gallery. You're surrounded by the quiet, but colors of impressively crafted sculptures are screaming. A particular piece draws you in. The guard is nowhere to be seen. All you want to do is touch that artwork, get a deeper sense of the colors and textures. How much attention are you paying to the sign? You know, the sign which says, "Please do not touch the artwork." More often than not, it's ignored, and this is what happens. A small sculpture valued at a whopping $42,000 has been broken. This blue sculpture, it belongs to the renowned artist Jeff Koons. It was part of his iconic Dog Balloon series. It was displayed at a VIP-only opening at a Miami art gallery. A woman, an art collector, gave it a little tap. The artwork fell and shattered to smithereens. They say every dog has its day. Maybe that's all that this dog had. You know how a car crash on a highway draws a huge crowd? The aftermath of the sculpture crash resembled that. Bemused guests gathered around the shards. Some filmed the scene on their phones. And the culprit? Well, she said she wanted to disappear. Who wouldn't? But this is not the first time art has been damaged, and it probably isn't the last. An American tourist smashed two priceless sculptures in the Vatican last year, one in anger, the other accidentally. In 2020, a man sat on a historic sculpture and broke off its delicate toes, accidentally. For the art elite, touching displayed art is horrifyingly wrong. But in reality, we touch art all the time. Just look at the art pieces to see the damage, scratches, scuffs, drawings. and even gum and trash deposited in crevices. Spectacular attacks of damage are rare, but smaller acts of damage are routine. In fact, a security guard at the British Museum once said, for every 100 people he stops from touching the art, there are 200 more that he cannot catch. He called it trying to turn back the sea. But why do people do it? Well, some do it to express appreciation. Touching art heightens that experience. Others are simply expressing distaste. How do the museums see this? They call these acts mistakes. But what would they call this? Protesters defiling art. In the last few months, we've seen this across the world. They throw soup at paintings. They touch art aggressively. They topple statues honoring enslavers. And that's not all. Art has suffered vandalism. Da Vinci's Mona Lisa was attacked by acid and rocks. An Ilya Repin painting was slashed with a metal pole. Examples seem endless. Artwork has been punched, stabbed, slashed with a meat cleaver and lit on fire. These are, of course, aggressive examples of connecting with art. The thing is, art demands reaction. It provokes it. And it all starts with a simple tap on the sculpture. Experts have spent years investigating this. What motivates visitors to touch exhibits without permission? What do they choose to touch? How does this unauthorized act make them feel? Sometimes it's our inherent desire to learn more, our curiosity. Sometimes it's a sense of power. Look at the Renaissance paintings. They show gods and mortals. It looks like the painting must be revered. It keeps us at a distance. So we must get closer. Other times, art feels so out of the world. You must touch it to make sure it's real. But all in all, humans seek an emotional connection with art. Touching it is a simple way to achieve that. But our need to inspire connection can often cause harm. It sounds like an unhealthy relationship with art, doesn't it? Perhaps the best way to stay in touch with art is to stay out of touch with the artwork itself. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We start with Turkey, still picking up the pieces. The rescue effort has ended in all but 2 places. Amid the devastation, some birthday cheer for a 5-year-old girl. And carnivals across the world. In Italy, it's the Battle of Oranges, much like Holi in India and Tomatina in Spain. This event dates back to medieval times, we're told. In Colombia, it's the Battle of Flowers, one of the most popular parades in the country. And in Brazil, the world's biggest carnival, the showstopper was a Bollywood-style parade with Brazilians in traditional Indian clothes dancing to Indian music. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
Toma bastante água e cerveja. Vamos, 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 vamos.